If I'm being honest, spring is probably my least favorite season just because it has the worst holidays, there's way too much mud, there's oh my god, allergies. Everywhere you go, people are just... It's not a bad season, I just feel like the other ones have so much more to offer. But if there's one thing I do like about spring, it's the rain. I've always loved having an excuse to stay inside and play video games, and I have a lot more of those now. But I will never not appreciate a good, cozy, rainy day. It's also really soothing and beautiful, and I think a lot of video games are starting to perfect its appeal within their worlds. So today I wanted to talk about the use, the art, if you will, of rain in video games. And let me summarize 95% of that with atmosphere. Rain is used so much to establish atmosphere and invoke emotions, but almost always negative ones like sadness or fear. Because while it's generally associated with melancholy, this is a trope done so frequently that from a creator standpoint it can feel necessary, but from an audience standpoint, predictable. I'm not saying it's a bad thing by any means. In fact, there are many fantastic times in games where the mood deepens because of rain, and that's what I want to discuss, but sometimes it is just incredibly forced. Oh, this character just died, now let's have it rain because the atmosphere needs to be a gloomy one, and Rat Tail Papa can't bring that on his own. But I don't want to focus on that. I want to focus on how rain immerses you, or gives life to the environment, or has some other method of gripping the player and making them go, rather than being a shoo-in for effect. So I'm going to talk about my favorite uses of rain in video games, be it atmospheric, graphical, maybe even mechanical. My name is Zach, let's get to it. A Link to the Past is not only the first game I played that made me realize how cool rain in video games was, it's the earliest game in today's set. The first part of the game is very tense, and the rain helps to emphasize that. Plus, it looks pretty good for 1991. But get this, when you go inside to get out of the rain, you continue to hear the rain hit the roof outside. That's fucking cool. That's cooler than being cool. It's a super minor detail and maybe not worth getting excited about in 2020, but I really do believe this is where everyone first saw the potential for rain. Because afterwards, so many SNES games took on the atmosphere approach and pulled it off fantastically. Donkey Kong, Final Fantasy, Kirby, Super Metroid. And speaking of that, years later, Metroid Prime. The rain at the Chozo Artifact Temple is extremely calming and maybe a bit sad, but in a game filled with foreign and violent life forms attacking you every step of the way, it's the closest thing to peace and home. I really like the visor effect on this one. Another good example of the rain on screen effect are the recent Mario games, and Odyssey has some beautiful, beautiful rain the first time you pull up in New Donk City. Now I want to hop to the complete other end of the timeline and talk about Red Dead, because holy shit. Red Dead Redemption 2 is of course the king of realism and minor details. When it rains, puddles form, and those puddles also evaporate later in the sun. Also after it rains we have mud along with mud physics, whoa, and of course it's a Rockstar game so everything is in tip-top teraflop shape. This just demonstrates the crazy amount of range that a Rockstar game has. This exists in the same game as this, or this with this. Another cool thing video games do with the rain is change the soundtrack. Some games give you a completely different song, and other games alter a normal song for the rain. More specifically, the second day of Majora's Mask. It's still very close to the main theme, just with a few instruments missing and sped up a tad. But this starts to make it feel a little more desperate, like, hey, is it just me, or is the moon closer than it was yesterday? But the residents are more concerned with the rain, and so am I. The amazing soundtrack of Persona 5 also does this. On normal days you hear Beneath the Mask, and on rainy days you hear a more echoey version without percussion. Because the rain is your percussion. This version's a bit more barren and empty, but so are your options on rainy days. If Persona 5 does this well, Persona 4 takes it into overdrive since the rainy days are completely silent. I'd say this approach is more fitting for that game since it ties heavily in with the plot. Now, we can't talk about rain in video games without talking about a heavy rain. Ooh. No, it's not the greatest game ever, but it rains pretty much the entire game to keep you grounded in the bleak story, and it definitely keeps the ambience intact. Do I think the rain itself looks good? I mean, yeah, sure, for 2010, but I think the intro sequence showing you everyone in the community during the weather is very memorable. Also, I was trying to find some footage for this, and I have never seen this fucking video before. Okay, so these are all excellent examples of how rain can and should be done to immerse you in a video game, but they all kind of stay behind that fence of atmosphere, particularly the negative or depressing or fearful ones. And there's a few examples where rain in a video game throws you a completely different feeling. It has taken me 5 whole minutes in a video about rain to talk about Breath of the Wild. Hyrule is more alive than ever before in Breath of the Wild, and the weather system is phenomenal, and each type of weather has its own mechanics. Rain specifically is a reminder that God is real, and he's very pissed at you and doesn't want you coming any closer. When it rains in this game, it can be extremely stressful, and you literally can't build a fire to skip the time out of it. The same goes for Drive Club. Super forgettable game, but its realistic portrayal of how rain moves on a windshield is not. It's just the fact that you have only one wiper speed setting, a pretty slow one, that makes the rain a bitch to deal with. Now, does rain being used as a punishing mechanic in these games make it any less enjoyable? Absolutely not, because it's still breathtaking as hell. And Lord knows you can be angry at something that is still very pretty, haha. If there's one game that proves that rain doesn't have to be a sad thing, it's the original Animal Crossing on the GameCube. It's another game that changes its music when it rains, only this time we are treated to an upbeat and cheerful bop. And I'd say it fits the dynamic character of the game. Rain is another exciting type of weather, and I love experiencing it when I have the chance to. Especially in 2002 when the internal clock was still kind of a flashy feature. Also, you get nicer fish when it rains, what's not to love about it? Rain is also a very happy event in Metal Gear Solid 5 because you get this, nice scene with Quiet. Thank you, Kojima. Look, there are plenty of fantastic scenarios of rain in video games, especially recently because they have been killing it in this regard. But I hope if I've managed to get anything across with all of this, it's that rain can be used in more ways than just a device to make us scared or sad. It's ambient, it's celebratory, and goddammit, I'm sure a graphic designer somewhere worked hard on it. More importantly, it's a pretty successful persuasion that these worlds we're always participating in can be just as alive as we are, so not much at all. I just hope that when the clouds clear and we're once again greeted by sunlight, we've taken something from the rain. Like this coelacanth.